Okay, welcome everybody to the April 14th public meeting of the Abbotsford School Board. And of course, while I say public, we are not live streaming this meeting, and we do not have a live audience for obvious reasons. But within 24 hours, this meeting will be uploaded to YouTube. At the start of this meeting, I'm seeking the adoption of the agenda.
And
So moved.
Oh. All right, I think Trustee Rye and Trustee Anderson, I think I heard first.
So your voting button should be up.
I don't see my voting button.
At the top of your screen.
Right, and
Hang on.
I'm
for the
not
public
getting,
who will be looking at this, there
not
will be some
getting
glitches as
voting
this is our first virtual meeting. So please bear with us and be patient with us as we sort this out as our first, as I say, first virtual meeting. All right, Trustee Latham and Trustee Neufeld.
I have no buttons to push, sir.
I don't either. Sorry.
Try joining the meeting, sorry.
I may have to go out, I guess, and come back in. Oh dear.
Okay, while this is happening,
And then what you should do is
Got
also
it.
press the sync
Got
button.
it. I got it.
okay, while we're waiting for Trustee Latham, this is normally when we'd be singing "O Canada," but because this is a virtual meeting and this is something we'll have to work on, we will not be doing that. But I will acknowledge that while we are in all in different locations in the community, that we are meeting on the shared traditional ancestral territories of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. And we'll just wait for Trustee Latham.
I can't find the, sorry, I can't find the join meeting. It's not here.
Would it be appropriate that
Hmm.
if we just take a verbal at this time and then we move along?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm not.
The only thing, Stan, is it's going to be, we'll need to get her on track here for this at some point. You don't see the join meeting, Freddie?
No, it's just a copy of the agenda.
Oh, do you have a log out button on your screen?
Yeah,
It says welcome Freddie and it says log out.
yeah.
Press the log out. And then log back in. And then join the meeting.
Ah. Okay, yes. Thank you.
Welcome.
And you see the voting buttons? There we go. All
Yep.
right.
Yeah,
There you go,
I'm
ready?
in. I'm in.
Okay, and with thanks to Trustee Wilson for making some changes, I'm seeking approval of the minutes of our meeting on March 10th, 2020.
Latham,
Neufeld.
Okay, Trustee Latham, Trustee Neufeld,
Wilson, please.
yes.
I just want, you noted the changes I requested. Those are appropriate. I'm just confirming.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. That's part of our motion here, okay?
Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, we have one consent item, looking for approval of that item.
So moved.
Rye.
Trustee Pauls and Trustee Rye, I think I heard. right. And a next order of business is we have a delegation from Mr. and Mrs. Rock regarding the International Baccalaureate. And I believe we have, they recorded their presentation for us, and we thank them for that.
Yeah, okay, I'll play right now.
Okay, thank you.
And staff, we really appreciate the time you've given us in presenting today. We know that the COVID-19 situation is creating extra workload as the district implements new learning methods while still performing critical planning functions for future school years. Special thanks to all of you for your hard work and your dedication. With this presentation, we are requesting that the pre-diploma program for IB at Abbey Senior be classified as a district program, meaning students from all catchments could apply for the program. This request supports the district's vision, mission, and strategic plan. As we explain the reasons for our requests, we ask that you keep in mind the following 5 questions. Are we emulating best practices to be world-class? Are we being fair and equitable in our approach to student achievement? Are we supporting individualized education experiences across the district? Are we supporting the social and emotional needs of all students across the district equally? And are we optimizing resources?
First, our vision to be world-class. The new BC curriculum aims to cultivate thinkers, communicators, and citizens with personal awareness and social responsibility. This is IB. In terms of academic programs, IB is arguably the definition of world-class. The IB diploma is recognized in over 100 countries and 2,000 universities. From the research we've done, most lower mainland districts have IB MYP, or a homegrown pre-diploma or pre-IB. Diploma or pre-IB is offered. It's offered to the whole district. Abbotsford would be one of the only districts to not offer preparatory programs for the IB diploma to all their catchments. We need to meet every child where they are at. It's crucial that we provide viable different opportunities for students to learn. What programs are there in the district if you have a student that is academic? The IB program and pre-diploma should be just as important and available as our district-wide sports academies and integrated art schools for those students that qualify. Some have expressed that honors programs at other high schools can provide similar preparation to pre-diploma. I called our catchment high school, and here's how it went. Hi, I understand you have honors programs at this school. And the staff member answered, well, yes, we have our science and business program. I said, okay, what happens if my child is also really strong in English, French, and history? We just have the regular program for that. Okay, well, the science and business program sounds really good. And that program starts in grade 9? No, it's just grade 11 and 12.
While this might not be the case in all catchments, it happens to be the case in ours. However, even in catchments that offer honors courses in grades 9 and 10, they can't provide curriculum continuity. It's been shown that students transferring into IB at Abbey Senior from honors programs at other schools don't do as well as students who attend pre-diploma at Abbey Senior in grades 9 and 10. In our letter, we gave the example of curriculum continuity in English. Another example is French. The French IB teacher at Abbey Senior knows the grammar content and themes that are expected of the students in their assessments at the end of year 2. She starts preparation for them already in grade 9. She uses French 11 resources for the grade 9 and 10 students. She comments that honors classes at other high schools probably cover more material than the regular classes at those schools, but they still aren't prepared for the grammar expectations of Diploma IB at Abbey Senior. This lack of curriculum continuity puts out-of-catchment kids at a significant disadvantage versus their peers who attend pre-diploma at Abbey Senior. Throwing the regular program out-of-catchment kids into grade 11 IB would be like throwing them into French immersion at the grade 11 level and expecting them to do just as well as the immersion kids. Kids transferring into IB diploma at grade 11 are typically scoring a full 10% lower than in their classes than those coming up through pre-diploma at Abbey Senior. And these are bright kids typically transferring in from honors classes at other high schools.
We've heard that pre-diploma doesn't need to be offered to the district because it's homegrown and not official IB. IB organization knows that we have pre-diploma and has approved our pre-diploma name. We've gone through a number of name changes over the years to satisfy IBO. IB Honors, Pre-IB Honors, Pre-IB, and now Pre-Diploma. IB is well aware of the name. Most of our innovative district programs are not accredited, such as integrated arts, traditional schools, sports academies, district integrated studies program, are all homegrown but available to the district. If Abbotsford is firmly committed to providing innovative programs, the fact that pre-diploma has been developed by Abbey senior teachers should not stop us from offering it.
One objection we've heard to our proposal is that kids who are IB candidates are also the same students who are in leadership, student council, and athletics. And wouldn't they make a big difference at their catchment school? To that, we respond that first of all, we're not talking about a lot of kids. Not all bright kids want to do IB. And AP programs at Bateman and Yale satisfy the academic desire for many kids, and lots of kids don't want to leave their friends behind. But for the kids who really want to do IB, they'll apply whether it's in grade 9 or in grade 11. If they're held back until grade 11, they'll spend time at their catchment schools in grades 9 and 10. They'll often get involved in leadership, get subject and citizenship awards, and then at grade 11, they'll cut loose for the IB program at Abbey Senior. For their peers who were left behind at the catchment school, how are they to feel about their school when the high-performing academic students abandon them for the IB program midway through the formative secondary school years? There's no doubt that there will be an acute sense of loss that is greater in grade 11 than it would have been in grade 9. And for students leaving for the IB program at Abbey Senior in grade 11, it's a huge social and emotional hurdle. They need to break into established peer groups before they can ask friends about class material or homework. This is on top of adjusting to the demand for school workload and trying to catch up after having been denied access to the foundational pre-diploma learning years. Putting kids through this social and emotional roller coaster in grade 11 creates significant turmoil. The changeover from middle school to secondary school, that is from grade 8 to grade 9, is by far the more natural break for an easier transition for the students, for their peers, the teachers, and for their parents.
Cutting out of catchment kids out of pre-diploma might seem like the quick and easy solution to enrollment issues, but what are the long-term implications? Out of catchment students entering pre-diploma are more likely to stay in IB. Right now, only 3 out of the 11 grade 12 diploma students are actually in catchment. Some of the IB year 2 classes are not very full. Imagine if the out-of-catchment kids were not there or had dropped out after transferring because they didn't get the same preparation. You'd have a very small class. The kids who are most likely to complete the IB diploma are the out-of-catchment kids who came up through pre-diploma. Why is that? It's because these are the kids who are willing to overcome the barrier of leaving their friends behind to embark on a journey for a greater chance of success at university. If the district is looking for efficiencies and optimized resources, let's make sure we don't end up with small class sizes. The best way to maximize retention of IB students right through to grade 12 is to ensure the most dedicated students are entering the program in grade 9.
Catchment kids deserve to attend their own catchment school. We agree with that. But with the demographics of the area, the district needs to plan for more students, whether or not they allow equitable access to pre-diploma. So the decision really is, are we going to provide fair and equal opportunity to all students in the district? MYP at Abbey Middle is a great program. In fact, we'd say it's a model school. We would love to see our kids there, especially since we're helping to fund it as taxpayers in the district. Unfortunately, we live in the wrong part of Abbotsford, so our kids can't get access to that excellent program. Making the grade 9 and 10 pre-diploma a district program would be one way to make up for this inequity. If resources were available, there would be other models where the entire school could have preparatory IB experience. And that would be great, but it's not our objective with this presentation to define what the preparatory program should look like at Abbey Senior, but only to ensure that whatever IB development program is chosen by you is available to all students from all catchments. This is the only way to ensure equitable opportunities in our approach to student achievement. So keeping in mind all these factors and our vision of a world-class, innovative, and individualized education experience for every student, and our strategic pillars of student success and optimized resources, the decision to remove district access to pre-diploma does not support the vision, mission, and strategic plan for our district. In conclusion, we request that trustees move to classify pre-diploma as a district program, as outlined in Section 5 of AP 336, making it accessible by application to all students in the district. With a motion like this, you will start the process for staff to investigate, research, and make proposals by which this can be accomplished. We know this won't be easy, but as with all important decisions, it starts with your vision. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
And I thank you for your thoughtful, respectful presentation. And I thank you for accommodating our virtual meeting by recording your presentation for us. And of course, as with all delegations, we will not debate or discuss the presentation at this time, but you will receive feedback from us at a future date. Okay, that moves us to reports on achievement and results, and I'll turn it over to Superintendent Godden.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. My report this evening is a solitary one, and it's a large and a solitary one in large part because of the circumstance we find ourselves. The last time the board had a meeting, there was no the concern over COVID-19 was really just a blip on the radar, but since then it has accelerated tremendously, such that my report this evening is largely about the monumental efforts our staff have made in, I'll say, pivoting after the government made the difficult decision on March the 17th to discontinue face-to-face instruction indefinitely. I'm gonna have my trustees. You have the document there. It is the district's pandemic response plan, which was developed by our senior team, and a continuity of learning plan, along with some other documents which just map out the key things that we have had to do in the last few weeks to prepare for instruction. I think the best way for me to do this evening, though, is to speak to the report via the 4 principles that the ministry asked us to consider in developing our continuity of learning plan. Those 4 pillars, principles are maintaining a safe and healthy environment, providing services to the children of essential workers, supporting vulnerable students who may need special assistance, and providing continuity of education for all students. So I'll start with what we have done in the last little while as far as maintaining a safe and healthy environment for all students. As you know, the pandemic is such that the concern for safety of our staff and students is tantamount. It is with that expectation that we underwent a pretty significant deep clean of all of our schools over the break, and developed a pretty robust plan around physical distancing and the universal precautions having to do with hand washing and coughing into your sleeve and being 2 meters away from each other, that we developed this plan. The big part of the plan, however, was a pretty significant remote work agreement that we developed in the organization for all of our staff as much as possible to work remotely to kind of create the conditions for people to not be in close proximity with each other and for us to inadvertently spread the virus. And so you can imagine the dramatic shift that has been for some teachers, but to their credit, we underwent some pretty significant training in a very short period of time to teach our staff, those who are not familiar with some of the tools that we have available, to get them up and running and to make to use it to make preliminary contact with families. We've had to be in lockstep alignment with WorkSafe expectations, which I can proudly say that we are. And it's with that now that we're, I'll say 2 weeks after spring break, moving along in a way that I think respects the fundamental importance of staff safety. The second point has to do with providing services to the children of essential workers. And as you know, essential workers refer to our frontline workers who work in the healthcare system, but there also include government workers who help to support the government's initiatives, as well as people who work in the supply chain. So districts have been required to develop a plan that would provide education for these students, and we have been working at that for a long time now, with the help of some of our partners, Hand in Hand in particular, and Fraser Valley Montessori. We're able to be up and running immediately after spring break to provide ongoing services for families. But since then, we have developed a plan to deploy our own staff, teachers, support staff, administrators, to provide what we're calling day camp for the children of essential workers. That those programs will be in place and will commence this week. As you can imagine, the first and most challenging task was to get that information from parents. We sent a couple of surveys home to find out about these parents and if they had childcare needs, and then to determine what some of those additional needs were. You can imagine the task then of finding staff who are available to do that work here, and then designing a program for those students that would be meaningful and safe at the same time. I'm happy to say that that program is about to roll out, and that our essential workers can rest assured that their children will be well taken care of in the days and weeks ahead if needed, as they do the very important work of taking care of those who are ill. The third bullet has to do with vulnerable students, and the board's vision is really about each child and every child in the organization. And so, as you can imagine, between families who didn't have enough food or families who didn't have technology, part of our plan had to be how we could pivot things like our school meals program or our device allocation to allow those students to have access. Again, I can say our staff have been absolutely amazing in first of all, pivoting the district school meals program so that we did our first delivery last week with great success, and the families the food is not being delivered to our schools, but instead, if you can believe it, to the homes of these families on a weekly basis. And we've received some very positive feedback from families in that regard. And with respect to technology, again, under the leadership of our IT department and technology department, we were able to redeploy a number of our devices to families who didn't have technology, but also by piggybacking on some of the organizations that were providing free wireless services for these families. And I can say that at least as of last week, all of the needs had been covered with the deployment that we had of technology, which has been I'll say a massive undertaking in getting kids to come in and collect the devices, and then of course showing them how to use it, and then getting them set up and so on. So again, kudos to our staff. Finally, before I open the questions, I'll speak to just a broad and ongoing continuity of learning plan. The big message that I think we tried to communicate to our staff was that in a time like this, as anxious as we might want to be to get academic learning up and running, the more important part was the social connection. So trustees, you will have seen a number of what I'll call joyful contacts that our staffs made. Many of them posted on social media in letting kids know how much they're missed. And some of it was done to song, some of it to poetry, but I'll say all of it joyfully. the key message for me though was what I'll say was one-to-one contact. We went on a campaign to have every child in the district be contacted by their teacher or a staff member. And while I, it's not 100% based on the numbers that we have, it's over 90% of our children were contacted by their teacher. And to let them know, A, we care about you, and B, things are going to be a little bit different, but it's going to be okay. And so that's been the focus for us right now. I think, week 2 in after spring break, we've now started to develop a little bit of a rhythm. It's a new normal for a number of our teachers, and we will play it by ear as we pull together to make the best of a very trying situation. So it's with that I'll turn it over to trustees for if there's any questions. I will also just extend another big thank you to all of our staff, in particular senior staff, who basically during spring break spent hours and hours pivoting the district to deliver remote education and develop continuity of learning opportunities. And so I am tremendously indebted to them for their work and their dedication. And so it's with that I present the report, and will entertain any questions that trustees might have.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Trustee Pauls.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Godden, for that update. Something I had written in my note from reading some of the bulletins that you have been sending us that you alluded to tonight was the concern of once they had devices in the homes that we had lent them, that they might not have access to actual Wi-Fi. And some of those documents said that families were to phone Shaw and TELUS to find out about discounted services. But what you actually said just now was that we have free service that's available to those families. Is that correct? I just wanted to clarify that. And how does that work? So they actually, if they can't afford even a discounted rate, we actually have a deal in place for them to get free service at this point?
So at this point, what we have is that the Shaw hotspots are now free to our students. And so they have access. I'm not sure about where TELUS is with that. I think that they're still discounted, but I know that the Shaw hotspots have been made free for the interim.
This clarification. So that might not necessarily mean that they have access to it in their home, but they could take the device somewhere and
that's correct.
Parking lot outside a restaurant that's not opened, or what? I don't know what that looks like.
That's right. I mean, their hotspots are all over the place, and so yeah, they'd have to find a spot where they could potentially do that if they were not with that carrier to do it, or if they didn't have internet service. If they were with that carrier, they could get the service then for free. But if they weren't with that carrier, then they'd have to find one of the hotspots that are all over the community.
Okay, thank you.
Neufeld?
The other piece I will throw in is this. That while we know so much of this is about technology, there are low-tech and no-tech options that involve kids coming to the school, get your textbooks, and we can send you what assignments need to be, and we'll create a mechanism for you to get your work done and submit it. So we are working on those options because not everybody is going to do all of this as seamlessly as we think through technology. There are low-tech and no-tech options also available to students.
Trustee Neufeld.
Yeah, Superintendent Godden, I've got one question of clarification and I guess an overall comment, I believe. 90% of the students have been contacted. What about the other 10%? What's happening there?
So we are working on it. I sat in on the team meetings that we had today, and as you can imagine, there are some kids of great risk in our community, and so I was given, for instance, one story today where there were 20-something students that a given elementary school hadn't been able to get a hold of. And so what the staff did was they visited the houses, knocked on the door, then backed away and said, we've been calling and we haven't heard, is everything okay? So that's what's underway right now is very specific contacts for some of the families where there's great risk. That task has been taken from the classroom teacher and given to the counselor or given to the youth care worker. So it's not done. It's just we knew that this was going to be difficult for some families, and some of them will need a very personal touch to do that. And it's with our youth care workers and counselors who are now doing that. So I anticipate to get an update on this by the end of the week, that I would trust that we can get a hold of all of our kids, but for sure some of them has been very difficult.
And thank you. And my second comment comes from the page 5 of the document. If I'm reading the numbers correctly, 80% of people who catch COVID-19 won't get seriously ill. 1 in 6 will have breathing problems, and even less pass away. And so I'm wondering if the cure is going to be worse than the COVID-19 itself. And I know this is out of our hands. It's the Ministry of Education, but I'm just trying to figure this thing out as far as the long, I mean, we got 100% lockdown, and 80% of the people will just have mild symptoms. 1 in 6 will get ill enough to be hospitalized, and only a small fraction of those will pass away. So I guess for me, I'm trying to wrap my head around this and finding out are these extreme measures being taken? And I know it's not our measure, it's the Ministry of Education.
Yeah.
I get that.
So I wouldn't purport to speak on behalf of the medical health officer, because I know this was part of the briefing that we all received as superintendents, that there is risk, and you know, how many lives are we prepared to take a risk at? I mean, we have a number of our staff, for instance, who are immunocompromised, or they have relatives who are immunocompromised. And so I think, though, as this goes on, the government and in particular our medical health officer is going to have to look at what school is going to look like. And I think in the same way that we eased our way into this, we are going to have to potentially ease our way out of this, being very mindful of the evidence, at least now, is that many of our children are not passers on of the virus. Mm-hmm. But at this point, we'll have to wait for the medical professionals to kind of tell us how to pivot with this one as we get out of it.
I was just wondering if the other trustees who read page 5 were a little bit stunned by the numbers, or were you not stunned by the numbers?
I can say that I saw those same numbers, and I guess, you know, I'm no medical expert, so I really think that our job is to follow the advice of those people who know those things, and you know, so I would say that you know, we will open our schools when we're advised that it's safe to open our schools, and everybody will have a different determination of what safe means, but I think what my determination is what the medical people say.
Trustee Latham.
And then Wilson.
Okay, Trustee Latham.
I really appreciate the mandate on no specific number of hours that students spend on their coursework. So rather the determining of sufficient learning, which I think allows students to learn at their own pace. It hopefully doesn't overwhelm them. I think in some cases, there's a lot of work now that is heading in the direction of our students. And so, you know, I appreciate that teachers will make a judgment call just in terms of what kids do and how they present it for their teachers. I think this affords, some maybe significant changes in how we do things in the future, perhaps, just in terms of the virtual learning. And I see a lot of creativity and innovation, which is, I think, central and really important to the work that we do in education. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, what I'd say to that is there's this balance you have to strike with, you know, there's a lot of trauma in our whole society right now. It's across the world, and academic learning is not top of mind for many families, particularly if the stress has been compounded by losing your employment, for instance. So we've tried to communicate the message to our teachers to be this work has to be manageable, but it has to be joyful. It has to be something worth doing. 20 years from now, you know, I mean, we're all going to remember 2020. Do we want to remember the math equation that we learned, or that you had a teacher who reached out and touched your heart about how you were doing and how it felt, or had you do something that was really meaningful and important? So that's the message that we're trying to do, that, you know, we can throttle back a little bit and spend some quality time with the kids and have the tasks that we have them engaging be really meaningful, because that's what's going to help them pull through, I think, this difficult circumstance.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. I have a couple comments and probably a couple questions. First, kudos to the staff in our district. They're doing a fantastic job. I hear nothing but high praise and kudos. I mean, I hear nothing but high praise and kudos. So high praise and kudos to the rest of the staff. Pass it on, please. One of the questions that I have is around the essential service providers, those with children. And there's a list, there's a priority list that exists. How far down that list are we providing support? How far down have we made it?
We have made it down. This week we're working on tier 2. We were expected by the government to be ready for tier 1 immediately after spring break, and we were. What we gathered, though, was that of the 80 spots that we had available in that first week, only about half were taken. And so I think as this situation progresses in the Fraser Valley and more pressure is put on the healthcare system, specifically in the Fraser Health Authority, that number, I think, will rise. And sure enough, it has, because as of today, the number of people requesting that is up to 200. And so we are just beginning to work on tier 2, and I suspect the number will be over 500 when we get to tier 3.
Okay, thank you. I did one more comment, and it's in regards to Trustee Neufeld's question about the numbers and the where are we here, that, you know, around 1 out of every 6 people will become seriously ill and develop difficulty breathing. I guess my comment or my response to that is that I think it's okay that we take those precautions, because what if it's our family member? What if it's one of our teachers? What if it's a principal? I'm thinking that the abundance of precaution right now, precaution is appropriate, because what if that person is somebody that's near you? And speaking as someone who has had a family member, not in my home, who has been diagnosed with COVID-19, it's a scary place to be in, and the reality hits really hard that it's actually closer to us than we like to think. So I'm okay with the precautions. I think this is a time where risk is taking high risk is not warranted. So, thank you.
And you had some questions too?
Well,
or is that it? Oh.
I think the superintendent answered my second question based on my first question, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any others? Then I have a question of the superintendent. So, you know, it couldn't be a more challenging time for senior management and our administrators, and of course now our teachers in making good things happen for kids. What are you seeing now are the things you didn't anticipate that are challenges? You know, I mean, you know, what is it you're working on that you didn't anticipate, or is there? I know you've done a great job with this, but are there things that you're still having to consider?
Yeah, there's two things that we're working on that I think will continue to be with us. One of them is about rolling the plan out for the children of essential service workers. That is going to grow, and we've got to find the right locations and the right people And so it's a logistical challenge for that because it keeps growing, right? So it's not just we had to find a specific number and plan for them. We had to find for a specific number that was going to grow and then build the program as it were. So that's one, I think. The other one has to do with, you know, it might seem like a minor issue, but if you put yourself in the position of the average 15, 16, or 17-year-old, you have to ask yourself the question about the work that you are doing and what will happen to my letter grades. What will it mean as far as me being promoted? What will it mean as far as me getting accepted to university if I'm in that age group? So the thing that we are working on now, which I think many students are expecting us to communicate about, is what does assessment and grading and reporting look like in this pandemic situation? Again, I'll go back to my point about wanting to do meaningful work. We want kids to learn for the sake of learning, but you know, the 17-year-old child will say, you know what, if this does not count, then I'm not sure how much time I want to spend. So, you know, the government has updated their Q&A document about assessment, grading, and reporting, and we now need to apply those principles to our teachers and for our staff and kids. And so that's going to be the next part now that we have to roll out. And the rest of it is just, you know, I say to our leaders, being an adaptive leader. Stuff is going to happen that we didn't anticipate last week, and we just have to be flexible and compassionate with each other and roll with it. We'll do it together and it'll work out.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Rai.
Okay, Trustee Rai.
Okay, Kevin, question on what you said earlier. The 200 spots, is that only for tier 1? And also, just for explanation to everybody else, what consists of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? We can read it, of course, I've seen it, but just to... Yeah,
so tier 1 are the folks who work directly in healthcare. So, and it's not just if you're a doctor or a nurse, right? I mean, you could work in food services. If you work in the healthcare system, you're part of the machine, if you will, that's helping to take care of sick people or people who potentially get sick. Tier 2 are those people who are potentially, let's say if you're a government worker, or if you have to, for instance, you look at the number of packages that the government has rolled out to help people who have been put out of work. So if you're a government worker that's being relied on to roll pieces of these programs out or to provide income assistance, that's tier 2. And tier 3 is what I just call the part of the supply chain. So if you work in trucking, or if you're one of those other essential places where you are required to bring food or staples to folks so that doesn't collapse underneath us, and you need childcare, that's the other place where we would provide support. So to answer your first question, then that number is just tier 1. We are now just rolling forward with tier 2. That's around 200, but I think that number is going to grow as the pandemic. If you take a look at the numbers in, say, coastal health region versus Fraser Health, you notice that the numbers are the two highest in the province. And that they're actually quite similar. I think there's only maybe 40 cases different between Fraser Valley and coastal, which tells us that as in the Fraser Valley, there is going to be more pressure put on our part of the healthcare system, which means we have to be ready to support those people who are putting themselves on the line by making sure that their kids are taken care of. So I think it's going to grow in the next few days in the Fraser Health region.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'm looking at my agenda and I see that brings us to our first question period. Now, I know the agenda was distributed to the public sometime before this meeting, and the public, if they had questions, was encouraged to send them into Secretary Treasurer Velastuk, and I don't know, did we get any questions?
We did not.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, we won't answer any. Okay, speaking of Secretary Treasurer, you're up next, operations.
All right. So what I want to do first is give a brief budget update for the next year's budget. Right before spring break, we received our operating grant announcement for 2020-21. On the second page of the document that you've got, you can see the change in the per student rates from 2019-20 to the proposed year for next year. So most of the rates have had some amount of increase. One of the things I will just say that we've got a little bit of a delay in working on the budget. I would say we're maybe about a week to 10 days behind, just in responding to the COVID-19 issues. So we've pushed back some of the dates for completion of some information. So our final enrollment projections that we use for school staffing estimates will be done this week instead of last week. So that pushes that out a little bit, but we're trying to get some of that work expedited. So that's the change in the per student rates. The operating grant, I'm just giving you a summary on the next page of what the change of those rates means in terms of overall funding. So the on page 3, it really just shows what the funding in next year would be had our enrollment stayed the same, and the only factor that changed in the grant was the per student rates. You can see that our total increase in funding is just under $2.4 million. The main part to look at, I think, is we're looking to make sure our costs are covered, and some of the changes that are made through the grant, and you can see like they've rolled the carbon tax reimbursement now into the climate factor. They've changed the names of a couple of supplements, whether it's the education plan or the equity of opportunity supplement. But at the end of the day, we're looking to see that our major costs are covered. So labor settlement costs are significant. The other one was the effect of the employer health tax, which was a separate grant and is now rolled into the operating grant, and it's about $1.5 million. So if we look at that basic per student funding amount, 1.7, almost $1.8 million increase, I think we're covered off for what our known increased costs are. Obviously, this doesn't really factor in a lot for cost of living and those kind of things. The grant right now does not include any money for either support staff or teacher labor settlements. So those will be announced and paid as through the grant, but at a later date. And the teacher one, obviously, upon ratification of their collective agreement. So that gives you a picture of what our funding change is. And so I think that puts us into a pretty decent place. I was somewhat pleased. There are years where I'm less pleased, but somewhat pleased to see that most of the costs that we were looking at that were significant were covered off. On page 4, I've outlined some of our major budget assumptions going forward as we build the plan for next year. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is how this pandemic and our response to it and government's response to it, and looking at what potential risks might exist in our budget for next year is of concern right now. And so trying to make some of those estimates, whether it is things like our international student enrollments or things as simple as interest rates. We keep a large amount of our excess or surplus resources on deposit with the government in the central deposit program. And since the start of March, those interest rates have dropped 0.5% 3 times. So we've seen a steady decline, and reasonably, I guess, when you look at the whole economic situation, that we would see those kind of things happen. So looking at things from user fees to all of those factors that might play into a more struggling economy going forward. So some other things that we build into our assumptions, obviously we assume that the published rates per student and things are all the things that will be sort of guaranteed going forward. Same with the Classroom Enhancement Fund, that all of the funding that we've relied on to implement the 2002 or 2001 collective agreement will be in place as well. So just to update, we always want to build our budget on the most current information that we have. So we don't want to look at just our budget numbers. So what we really want to be able to do is to be able to look ahead and say, what, never mind what our budget is this year, what is the forecast? Where do we think we're really going to be at the end of the year now? And so we've been able to look at a number of potential issues, and we haven't decided on all these yet, but just sort of looking at a number of potential issues that need to be addressed in the current year. So right now we're forecasting our revenues will be a little bit less than we had anticipated. Really, again, if you look at things like our investment income, things like rentals and leases, so we're waiving rent for the organizations that rent some of our facilities. Just for example, with the theater, we anticipate to lose around $70,000 or $75,000 in revenue just from cancellations in the theater for this year. We still have to deal with bus fees and how we make some decision around what we do with bus fees that we've collected. We've for April have not processed the bus fees for people that are on monthly payments, so that is something going forward. That is about $150,000 net impact on the budget. When we look on the expense side, one of the main areas that I think will be affected, although we still will have some costs incurred, is in the area of substitute employees. Obviously, with fewer people at work in their physical work location, the need for replacement workers is less. So I would anticipate we'll see some reduction in our substitute employee costs. Again, that will reduce our employee benefit costs. And right now we think, just because school is not on in a traditional way, that our overall supplies and services costs will be decreased as well. Some areas are going to have some cost increases. I know our facility folks have been acquiring, and doing some extra work around facilities, but while there may be some cost increases there, some other areas will experience a decrease. So at the end of the day, I think we're looking at about a $900,000 shift to the good. So instead of having just under a $3 million projected deficit for the current year, it'll be just under $2 million, which puts us in a much better position again for that planning component for next year. So we still have to make, I'll just share with trustees now, we still have to make an additional contribution to our Eagle Mountain project in the 2020-2021 budget. And I think that if we can find some way to possibly allocate those resources in this current fiscal year and free up the budget pressure into next year, that would be something that we should consider doing, but that will be a decision we make when we look at our financial statements in the summer. So that is a further item coming your way. So with that, we continue to work on the budget. We'll have you begin to doing some staffing estimates next week, and that's when really the budget starts to take a lot of shape. And we should be finalizing some of our revenue estimates by the end of this week as well. So I'll take any questions that you have, and that's it for me.
Neufeld?
Trustee Neufeld.
I have two questions. Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer. First question is, with the money moving around quite a bit, our districts have a bit of freedom with operational funds as far as moving it to where it's needed and where it's not being used? Or do districts need direction from the ministry?
We don't need any direction from the ministry. We haven't made a change to our budget, so we've even from the board's perspective, we haven't really made a change to our operating budget. We've been told from the ministry that some things will be permitted to be carried over that traditionally we don't. For example, our annual facility grant. If we can't get contractors in to do work that should be done by the end of the year, they've told us that there will be some carryovers permitted of those funds from this year into next year. So we're working on trying to get contractors in. Obviously we don't want to go in and start doing a gym floor, next week and then find out that school's going to start in 2 weeks and we've got in the middle of people ripping the gym floor and doing a bunch of work. So I'm trying to figure out, when is the best time to assign some of this contracted work and get some of this annual facility grant work done. So that's one of the changes, Trustee Neufeld, that they've allowed us, that there'll be some additional flexibility around being able to carry forward money. But we don't see a huge cost outlay. I mean, so for example, we've distributed a fair number of our Chromebooks to students.
Yeah.
Those Chromebooks are all at the end of their useful life, basically. So they're 3 or 4 years old. They're scheduled for replacement at the end of June. So we're in the process right now where we're replacing, 3,000 or 4,000 Chromebooks at the end of June. So this is not bad timing for stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. A second question, if I could.
Yep.
Do you see any signs from the ministry if other districts are going to have, I guess, money that's not being used traditionally where it's going to be used? Do you see any signs of clawbacks or anything pulling back? And because I know how they operate.
Yeah, I've been told not at this time, that it's not a consideration, but I've done this for a long time too. So I don't know. I mean, I think they're not thinking about it right now because they're dealing with what's in front of them. But at some point in time, somebody's going to have to look at the resources that have been expended to manage this, and they're significant provincially, federally. So I think there's going to be pressures going forward, next year, the year after, as we pay for things like this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Others? Okay, well, we'll keep with you, Secretary Treasurer, and our capital plan bylaw.
Okay, so this is the capital bylaw for our annual programs funding. So things like the that are on this list, the mechanical upgrades, the school enhancement program, CNCP funding for mechanical and HVAC upgrades, playground funding, and a new school bus as well. So the ministry requires a capital bylaw one capital bylaw to be passed for all of these items in their entirety, and then there are separate agreements that we will have with the ministry just for each of the special projects. I can give you an update briefly on the Rick Hansen. We just found out today that project, I think, is about $1.9 million, and that is going to tender, I believe, fairly quickly. So that's one of the projects still waiting on the Mowat building envelope upgrade at this point.
Okay, so looking for approval of all 3 readings.
Wilson with a question.
Okay.
Rye.
Trustee Wilson, Trustee Rye. Trustee Wilson, your question.
I just have a question to the Secretary Treasurer regarding other items that are not on this actual list. I know the board ran short in time because of the current situation, environment that we find ourselves in, but I'm wondering if you could give a brief update. ATSS is not on this list, and where that might be, because it's certainly not anywhere that's going out to tender, like say Rick Hansen, for instance. So, and also,
let me answer that one first. So
okay.
ATSS is with the ministry, so we're waiting to hear back from them now. We've submitted the final version of that project agreement. It's been costed, and so we're waiting to hear back from the ministry. They're, I think, trying to fast track getting the information they need for this project. So I'm hopeful that we find out something during the course of the summer, at least, on that project.
Okay. Is it one that's supposed to stay on the list until they approve it? Because if, for example, again, it's not on this list, what shouldn't it be?
Well, this is the list for new project funding that is approved as part of the capital approval. Once ATSS is approved, it will show up for funding be a bylaw that would come forward as well. So it's not approved for funding at this point. And that's mainly, you don't really get approval for funding until on a project of that scope, until all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Okay, I'm just asking just to make triple sure, because, you know, in our background, it's that the Ministry of Education has reviewed, et cetera, to determine priorities for available capital funding in these programs. And I just want to make sure that we're not missing the boat, leaving it behind, because it is not approved and it's not in the list. So I just wanted that confirmation.
Yeah.
And in addition, I was wondering if you could please comment on any information or news regarding capital projects and if they will be delayed because of COVID-19.
I don't know that they will be delayed. I think there's some concern about, you know, some projects potentially being delayed around being able to find workforce. Right now, it's maybe a good time to tender. We see a little bit of softening in the costs right now, but you know, I don't think that, you know, it maybe depends on the type of project and where you are as to what impact there might be related to this COVID. So, you know, again, I think a lot of it's workforce. The biggest part of our project at the start of this is to do some site work. So that is, you know, probably 6 or so months at least of doing site prep, which is, you know, good work to be doing at this time. But I haven't heard the ministry is not putting a hold on capital that we know of. So, and they're still suggesting that districts would be in a position to accept the risk related to tendering and going out to a project like this. So what they don't want to see, obviously, you know, for our Eagle Mountain project that we've, with the scheduled opening, not for a couple of years, so 2021, that there's escalation built into that project cost right from the start of approval date to when the final construction is completed. So what they don't want to see is the construction window extend for 6 more months, because that costs the province and potentially costs the district money in escalation costs. So the important part of the project is to make sure that we can adhere to the schedule that's planned, and then make sure that we live within the cost parameters in terms of when we go to tender, what the tenders look like, and what actually we're tendering. So I think that from where we're at right now, and having to enter into the market, looking at a site prep being the most significant part of the work, I think that's putting us in fairly decent place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have our voting buttons unless there are other questions. Okay, so seeking approval for all 3 readings. I see Trustee Neufeld, you haven't voted yet. All right, there we go.
First reading.
Okay, Trustee Rye,
Pauls,
Trustee Pauls for approval of first reading. Okay, seeking approval of second reading.
Neufeld.
Anderson.
Trustee Anderson and
Neufeld.
Trustee Neufeld. Second reading. Okay, who wants to read away? Third reading.
That School District 34 Abbotsford Capital Bylaw number 2020-21-CPSD 34-01 be given third reading, reconsidered, and finally passed and adopted on this 14th day of April 2020. So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Neufeld.
Second.
Second.
Trustee Rye, I heard, I believe. All right. Okay. And I'm looking at our very short agenda, and I'm seeing that we're down to trustee announcements.
Latham, I just wanted to say happy Education Week. Actually, happy virtual Education Week. And in the Vancouver Sun, Rob Fleming has done a really, I think, good job of commending all of our staff at school district levels and our teachers for the work that they're doing, and everybody else that we're repurposing, if I can use that word, that maybe aren't doing their usual tasks, but are helping out in another way. So yeah, an interesting time to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? So we've all seen examples both online and in my case, drove by my street, staff driving in the community and touching base with all the kids in the community. Wow, there's some amazing things happening. And so, you know, it's heartfelt to see these things and see all the good connections that our staffs are making with kids. Hopefully we get that last 10% of kids touch with them. With that, I guess, unless there's anything else, we will adjourn our meeting. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris, if you could stop our recording.
For sure. Just one moment.